ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਵਰਲਡ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਿਊਜ਼ 'ਚ ਸਵਾਗਤ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਰਿਦਮ। ਖਬਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਮਾਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੁਝ ਖਾਸ ਹੈਡਲਾਈਨਸ ਤੇ। ਜਰਮਨੀ ਟਾਪੂ ਤੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਧਮਾਕਾ, ਧਮਾਕੇ 'ਚ 3 ਦੀ ਮੌਤ, ਕਈ ਹੋਏ ਲਾਪਤਾ। दुनिया भर च गूगल की ईमेल सर्विस होई डाउन, यूजर्स होए परेशान, ऐप ते डेस्कटॉप ते सेवावां च पिया विघन। ब्रिटेन च क्रिसमस ते होई वड्डी हड़ताल, यात्री होए परेशान, रेल ते एयरपोर्ट सेवावां होणगियां प्रभावित, सैर सपाटे ते भी पवेगा असर। ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਵਿਸਥਾਰ ਨਾਲ। ਉੱਤਰੀ ਫਰਾਂਸ ਦੇ ਤੱਟ ਤੇ ਸਥਿਤ ਜਰਮਨੀ ਟਾਪੂ ਤੇ ਫਲੈਟਾਂ ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਬਲਾਸਟ 'ਚ ਸ਼ਨੀਵਾਰ ਸਵੇਰੇ ਹੋਏ ਧਮਾਕੇ 'ਚ 3 ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਮੌਤ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕਰੀਬ 1 ਦਰਜਨ ਲੋਕ ਲਾਪਤਾ ਨੇ। ਇਹ ਧਮਾਕਾ ਸ਼ਾਮ 4 ਵਜੇ ਤੋਂ ਠੀਕ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਅੱਗ ਤੇ ਕਾਬੂ ਪਾ ਲਿਆ ਗਿਆ। ਲੋਕਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਗੈਸ ਦੀ ਬਦਬੂ ਆਉਣ ਦੀ ਸੂਚਨਾ ਮਿਲਣ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਅੱਗ ਲੱਗਣ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸ਼ੁੱਕਰਵਾਰ ਸ਼ਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਇਰ ਬ੍ਰਿਗੇਡ ਨੂੰ ਬੁਲਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ। ਧਮਾਕੇ ਦੇ ਕਾਰਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਕੋਈ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲੀ ਹੈ ਅਤੇ ਇਸ ਦੀ ਜਾਂਚ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। गूगल की ईमेल सेवा जीमेल दुनिया भर के बहुत सारे उपभोक्तावां लई डाउन है। जीमेल के ऐप और डेस्कटॉप संस्करण दोवें प्रभावित होए ने। जीमेल सेवावां दुनिया भर के बहुत सारे उपभोक्तावां लई रुक चुकियां ने। हालांकि गूगल ने इस अचानक आउटेज नूं स्वीकार कर लिया। यह जानिया जांदा है कि जीमेल के दुनिया भर च 1.5 बिलियन तो वध उपभोक्ता ने। जीमेल ने 2022 दौरान सब तो वध डाउनलोड कीतियां ऐपां विचों एक है। ब्रिटेन च पिछले 30 सालों च सब तो वड्डी हड़ताल होने जा रही है। इस च बस, रेलवे, एयरपोर्ट, एंबूलेंस, नर्सिंग ते डाक स्टाफ समेत कई विभागों के 2 लाख तो वध कर्मचारी शामिल होंगे। खास गल यह है कि यह हड़ताल क्रिसमस दी छुट्टियां दौरान हो रही है। इस कारण बरतानिया आने वाले सैलानियों को मुश्किलों का सामना करना पै रहा है। क्रिसमस दौरान इत्थे सैर सपाटे च वड्डी उछाल देखने को मिलता है, पर इस बार कोई खास उत्साह देखने को नहीं मिला। सब दी सांझी मांग है कि तनख्वाहां विच वाधा कीता जावे। मुलाजमां दा कहना है कि जिस रफ्तार नाल महंगाई वध रही है, साडियां तनख्वाहां उस रफ्तार नाल नहीं वध रहीआं। कनेडा दे प्रीमियर्स वालों विनीपैग च न्यूज़ कॉन्फ्रेंस की गई, जिथे उन्हां सेहत संभाल दे मुद्दे नूं हल करन ते विचार कीती। ओंटारियो दे प्रीमियर डग फोर्ड ने प्रधानमंत्री जस्टिन ट्रूडो नूं जनवरी च एक तारीख निर्धारित करन लई कहा तां जो प्रीमियर सेहत ट्रांसफर ते मिल सकन अते एक सौदा कर सकन। कनेडा के 13 प्रीमियर कनेडा हैल्थ ट्रांसफर लिए $28 बिलियन के निवेश की मांग कर रहे हैं, जो उन्होंने कहना है कि सेहत लागतां लई संघी योगदान नूं वर्तमान च 22% तो वधा के 35% किया जाएगा।
This gentleman thinks outside the box. He's coming up with creative ideas. We've increased funding there, but they're in a catchment area that covers a few million people. They're the only, if you want to say, game in town when it comes to pediatric care. Do we need more funding? Absolutely. We need the federal government to set a date early this year, coming up, sometime in January, and nothing should be more important to the Prime Minister than meeting with the 13 premiers. That's the bottom line. And then we can sit down and have a proper discussion. You can't keep running for 2 years away from sitting down with all the premiers. It's just not cutting it. The number one issue in this entire country, from coast to coast to coast, is healthcare, and we can't go it alone. As I'll speak for Ontario, we're increasing the funding at a rate of $5.6 billion this year, $5 billion before. We need funding for long-term care. We need it for home care. We need it for mental health and addiction. We need it for HHR, health human resources, infrastructure. We need a partner. And when you see backlog surgeries right across this province, when you see an increase in pediatric care at the hospitals and long-term care, mental health and addiction, everyone's struggling, well, we need a funding partner. And right now, we're getting 22%. These provinces, all the provinces and territories, are paying 78%. It's unacceptable. Sit down, let's work collaboratively together, let's cooperate. We've done it before. I'll give credit to the federal government when it came to EVs, electric vehicles. They were a great funding partner. When it came to funding electric arc furnaces at the Fasco and Algoma, they were a great partner. When it came to childcare, great partner. So let's sit down and cooperate. The people of this country expect it. It doesn't matter what political stripe you come from. They expect us to cooperate and work together. So I'm asking the Prime Minister, set a date. We will put aside our whole schedule, all 13 premiers, to show up to Ottawa and sit down and let's hammer out a deal. I've been Premier for this our second term, 4.5 years. I know Scott Moe as well. We've been sitting around this table. Nothing's happened. It's not that hard to sit down and have a conversation and hammer out a deal. That's what we're asking for. You know, but it goes back to sitting down and working cooperatively together, sitting across the table from each other. Communication is critical, and hash out the different problems that we may agree or disagree on. But Robert, we can't have this meeting by ourselves. We've been running around and getting run around in circles for the last 4.5 years. It's not that hard for the Prime Minister and his team to sit around the table when you have 13 premiers all wanting to have a meeting. We're just asking, let's have a meeting. We all feel that we're pretty close to making a deal. Let's sit down and hammer out a deal.
ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਵਿੱਤ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਟੀਆ ਫਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਨੇ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਟ੍ਰਾਂਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਸਬਵੇ ਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿਸਥਾਰ ਲਈ $1.5 ਬਿਲੀਅਨ ਦੇ ਨਿਵੇਸ਼ ਦੀ ਘੋਸ਼ਣਾ ਕੀਤੀ। ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟ ਲਈ $500 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਤੱਕ ਦਾ ਨਿਵੇਸ਼ ਕਰ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ। ਫਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਨਾਲ ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਦੇ ਮੇਅਰ ਜੌਨ ਟੋਰੀ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੋਏ। ਫਰੀਲੈਂਡ ਨੇ ਸਿਹਤ ਦੇਖਰੇਖ ਤੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਤੋਂ ਵਧੇਰੇ ਸਿਹਤ ਫੰਡਿੰਗ ਲਈ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਜਾਰੀ ਮੰਗਾਂ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਚਰਚਾ ਕੀਤੀ।
I am really glad we're making this announcement and making this investment in the TTC and particularly in the Bloor-Yonge station. John, the mayor, and I were talking on the way here, and we pointed out really to each other, this is the single busiest subway station in the city and therefore in the country. It's one of the busiest stations in North America. And this investment is really going to make the lives of a lot of people who live in my riding and across this wonderful city much better. Even on a Saturday morning, so I spend most of my time in Ottawa. On Saturdays, my kids go, well, I have one kid left in Ukrainian school in Etobicoke, and I will be at the Bloor-Yonge station having dropped my son off in Etobicoke on Saturday morning, tomorrow. And so I can tell you, even on a Saturday morning, it is an extremely busy station. It's maybe the crossroads, the heart of Toronto. There are families, there are people going to work, there are people on a Saturday going to have fun. And that is the sign of a healthy, thriving city. It shows why public transit is so important, and it also shows why these investments are so urgently needed. That's why I am proud to announce today that our government is investing $500 million into capacity improvements at the Bloor-Yonge station. Toronto is getting bigger every day, and as our government works to create more jobs, welcome more skilled new Canadians, and build more affordable housing, Toronto's appeal to the world will only continue to grow. In 2019, we announced $10.4 billion for 4 major public transit infrastructure projects here in the GTA. The Scarborough Subway Extension, Eglinton Crosstown West, the Ontario Line, and the Yonge North Subway Extension. When complete, these projects will provide more than 6 million people with better access to services and public transit options across 1,200 kilometers. People here in Toronto need and deserve transit infrastructure that grows with them. Our government has and will continue to invest in Toronto's transit infrastructure, including as part of the billions of dollars in predictable funding we announced for communities across Canada in 2021. The investments we're making today will be critical to the future of Toronto's economy and the daily lives of hundreds of thousands of Torontonians. They will help to build a transit system that is reliable for everyone, accessible for everyone, safe for everyone, and a Toronto that we can all continue to be so very, very proud of.
ਟੋਰਾਂਟੋ ਦੇ ਮੇਅਰ ਜੌਨ ਟੋਰੀ ਨੇ ਸਟਾਫ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਐਕਸ਼ਨ ਪਲਾਨ ਦਾ ਸਟਰਕਚਰ ਤਿਆਰ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਮੌਜੂਦਾ ਜ਼ੋਨਿੰਗ ਨਿਯਮਾਂ 'ਚ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਤਬਦੀਲੀਆਂ ਲਿਆ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਸ 'ਚ ਸਾਰੇ ਰਿਹਾਇਸ਼ੀ ਸਥਾਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਮਲਟੀਪਲੈਕਸਾਂ ਦੀ ਆਗਿਆ ਦੇਣਾ ਅਤੇ ਅਖੌਤੀ ਬੇਦਖਲੀ ਜ਼ੋਨਿੰਗ ਨੀਤੀਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਖਤਮ ਕਰਨਾ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੈ। ਟੋਰੀ ਸਟਾਫ ਨੂੰ ਪੋਰਟ ਲੇਜੈਂਡ ਅਤੇ ਵਾਟਰ ਫਰੰਟ ਲਈ ਯੋਜਨਾਵਾਂ ਤੇ ਮੁੜ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਵੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਜੋ ਹਾਊਸਿੰਗ ਦੀ ਘਣਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਅਨੁਕੂਲ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਜਾ ਸਕੇ।
If you look at what's been done in the last decade, 400,000 homes have been approved by the City Council during that period of time, representing 2 times the number that have actually been built. And so that presents an interesting question of accountability, which really isn't directed at the city. That one might be directed elsewhere. But the bottom line is, regardless of all that, more needs to be done. We know that. We as a city government need to take a more aggressive approach to addressing the acute affordability and housing crises facing our city. And of course, we have to do it in partnership with the other governments. But there are things we have to do here in order to move forward more aggressively. The Housing Action Plan begins the process of updating the city's regulations so that we can meet or exceed the target of building 285,000 homes over the next decade that are set out in some of the recent provincial initiatives. This plan represents all aspects of the housing spectrum, from student housing to affordable housing to housing targets for the portlands and for the waterfront. Importantly, this plan will bring the city into the 21st century by removing the exclusionary zoning that has focused growth in just a few areas of the city and prevented Torontonians from having a variety of housing choices. And I spoke extensively about this during the election campaign, that we simply had to broaden out the range of housing options that were available to people who wanted to make their lives here, people who were young and older, people who wanted to grow up in the same neighborhood, for example, that they wanted to live in the same neighborhood they'd grown up in, or seniors who want to stay in the same neighborhood in which they've spent most of their lives. And that is why, at our first meeting and as the first item of business of the new City Council, I'm asking Council colleagues to direct the City Manager to develop this 2023 Housing Action Plan for the period between 2022 and 2026, which is our term in office, and to bring the updated plan back in a very short time, namely before the winter's over. The city manager would report to the executive committee no later than March on how this plan will be actioned, with clear timelines for council approval, implementation, and the potential units that will be created. Separate from this plan, but also in the same report, I'm asking council colleagues to approve the multi-tenant housing bylaw, which was deferred earlier this year. By approving regulations for multi-tenant housing, we can ensure that those who already live in these types of units, often our lowest income residents, can be protected, can be kept safe, and that we can regulate activity already taking place across the city, which is presently unregulated and is the source of many legitimate complaints to members of council and to the public service through 3-on-1 and otherwise. The source of many legitimate complaints that will be addressed by regulating and by legalizing these forms of accommodation. This measure that will be brought to the City Council next week through this report has been through the full public consultation and staff reporting process and was in fact deferred at the last meeting of the previous council. And so it is ready to come forward directly to council for debate and for a vote, and this report will achieve that.
ਕੈਨੇਡਾ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਮੰਦਭਾਗੀ ਖਬਰ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਆਈ ਹੈ। ਬ੍ਰਿਟਿਸ਼ ਕੋਲੰਬੀਆ ਦੇ ਸਰੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ 40 ਸਾਲਾ ਸਿੱਖ ਔਰਤ ਦਾ ਉਸਦੇ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਕਈ ਵਾਰ ਚਾਕੂ ਮਾਰ ਕੇ ਕਤਲ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ। RCMP ਨੇ ਇਹ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ। ਪੁਲਿਸ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਕੌਰ ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਘਰ 'ਚ ਚਾਕੂ ਦੇ ਕਈ ਜ਼ਖਮਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਪੀੜਿਤ ਪਾਇਆ। ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਕੌਰ ਦੇ ਪਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੱਕੀ ਵਜੋਂ ਹਿਰਾਸਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਿਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਪਰ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਛੱਡ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਨੂੰ ਹਸਪਤਾਲ ਲਿਜਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਸਨੇ ਦਮ ਤੋੜ ਦਿੱਤਾ। ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਮਾਮਲੇ ਦੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਾਂਚ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ।
At this time, investigators are identifying the victim as 40-year-old Harpreet Kaur of Surrey in hopes of advancing our investigation. The suspect, who was arrested in Surrey by the Surrey RCMP officers, was released from custody on December 8th, 2022. IHED investigators continue to gather evidence and are working to meet the charge approval threshold. Our investigators have been working tirelessly throughout the night. These incidents have a significant impact on not only the families, but on the friends and the community as a whole. And I wanted to make it clear that Surrey RCMP's Victim Services is around, and if anyone needs their assistance, don't hesitate to call them. They can be reached at the Surrey RCMP detachment. We're asking that anyone who has information regarding Ms. Cower, anyone who knew her from previous to this, to please contact IHIT at 1-877-551-4448 as we look to build a full story of her life. The information I have is that the suspect that was arrested at the incident by the Surrey RCMP officers was the husband of the victim. You know, for the privacy of the family who are grieving right now, I'm not going to get into whether they have children, anything like that. What I can say is this will affect the entire family. And that's far-reaching. Not only the family, the friends, the community, and those people that are impacted. Please do reach out to services like the Surrey RCMP's Victim Services, who do a fantastic job assisting families, victims, the family of the victims of these terrible crimes. So neither the suspect nor the victim had any negative police contact prior to this incident, to the best of my knowledge.
ਹਾਊਸ ਆਫ ਕਾਮਨਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਪ੍ਰਸ਼ਨ ਕਾਲ ਦੇ ਸੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਟਿਵ ਸੰਸਦ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਜਸਰਾਜ ਸਿੰਘ ਹਾਲਨ ਨੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਉੱਚ ਮਹਿੰਗਾਈ ਦੇ ਪੱਧਰਾਂ ਦਰਮਿਆਨ ਸਰਕਾਰੀ ਖਰਚਿਆਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜਸਟਿਨ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੂੰ ਸਵਾਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਤੇ ਟਰੂਡੋ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਤੇ ਮਹਿੰਗਾਈ ਦੇ ਮੁੱਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਨਿਸ਼ਾਨੇ ਵੀ ਸਾਧੇ। ਟਰੂਡੋ ਨੇ ਜਵਾਬ ਦਿੱਤਾ कि वित्त नाल संघर्ष कर रहे कैनेडियंस की सहायता लई उन्हां दी सरकार दे खर्चे जरूरी ने। हालांकि हालन ने दलील दी सी कि लोड़ां दी लागत दे नाल इह उपाय कैनेडियंस नूं बहुत ज्यादा खर्च कर रहे ने।
Deficit spending by this Prime Minister caused the Bank of Canada to hike its interest rates for the 7th consecutive time this year. An average mortgage will cost Canadians an extra $7,000 in interest payments alone. This Prime Minister's reckless spending has already driven up the costs on gas and groceries, and his failed energy policies will make home heating costs double. He'll further pile drive Canadians financially when his failed carbon tax increases this year. Why won't the Prime Minister stop his wasteful inflationary spending, axe the failed carbon tax so Canadians can keep the heat on this winter and food on the table?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are nothing if not at least consistent. They continue to ask us to stop being there to support Canadians. They oppose the child care agreements that we signed with the provinces, child care agreements that we're enshrining into law with legislation we're bringing in today. They oppose the dental support for low-income Canadians to make sure the kids have the best start in life possible. They oppose the rental supports that we move forward to deliver for Canadians. They stood against the kinds of supports we were flowing to Canadians through the dark times of the pandemic. We will continue to be there for Canadians and remain fiscally responsible because that's what Canadians expect.
Well, member for Calgary, Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, it's easier for this Prime Minister to sit in his ivory tower and blame everyone else and spend even more of Canadians' money to cover his own inflationary mess. His inflation tax is going to cost Canadians an extra $3,500 according to the Governor of the Bank of Canada. He is the architect of sending 1.5 million Canadians into a food bank, 500,000 of which were children. He's responsible for 1 in 5 Canadians skipping meals. He keeps failing and Canadians continue to be on the hook for it. When will he understand Canadians can't afford any more of his failures and just want to eat and heat their homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Conservatives say they stand with Canadians and then they stand in opposition to measures that ensure that Canadians can send their kids to the dentist. Then they stand in opposition to measures that will give families who pay a large amount of their low incomes on rent to get an extra bit of help. Then they stand against and continue to stand against child care fees that have been cut in half across the country, that is not only giving opportunities for kids to get the best start in life, not only supporting parents when the cost of living and payments are so high, but at the same time ensuring that our economy grows as people participate fully in our growth.
Yesterday, the Minister of Public Safety repeatedly claimed that vigorous security processes are in place, except that that isn't true. Government officials are on record saying that security issues were not considered when this contract was awarded, a contract that affects our national security directly. So, Mr. Speaker, when will the Liberals finally accept responsibility for this complete failure on their part to protect our national security?
ਕੁਦਰਤੀ ਸਰੋਤ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜੋਨਾਥਨ ਵਿਲਿਕਸਨ ਨੇ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸਰਕਾਰ ਦੀ ਨਾਜ਼ੁਕ ਖਣਿਜ ਰਣਨੀਤੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਉਸਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਦੇਸ਼ ਭਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਨੌਕਰੀਆਂ ਪੈਦਾ ਕਰਨ ਤੇ ਆਰਥਿਕਤਾ ਨੂੰ ਵਧਾਉਣ 'ਚ ਮਦਦ ਮਿਲੇਗੀ। ਇਸ 'ਚ ਅੰਤਰਰਾਸ਼ਟਰੀ ਭਾਈਵਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਜ਼ੋਖਮਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਚਣ ਲਈ ਡਰਾਈਵਿੰਗ ਖੋਜ ਅਤੇ ਟਿਕਾਊ ਬੁਨਿਆਦੀ ਢਾਂਚਾ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਸ਼ਾਮਲ ਹੈ। ਜੋਨਾਥਨ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਖਣਿਜ ਖੇਤਰ ਦੇ ਵਿਸਤਾਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ-ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਜੈਕਟਾਂ ਲਈ ਰੈਗੂਲੇਟਰੀ ਦੇਰੀ ਨੂੰ ਹੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਦੇ ਧਿਆਨ ਕੇਂਦਰਿਤ ਕਰੇਗਾ।
Around the world, financial markets are increasingly pricing climate risk into investment decisions. Smart money is flowing away from assets that are not compatible with a net zero world and towards opportunities that are. Just as any successful business must be capable of interpreting and reacting to changes in the business environment, countries must also be capable of thoughtful response and action if they are to sustain and to enhance their level of prosperity. It is in this context that Canada can choose to be a leader in the global economic shift, or we can let it happen to us, with all of the attendant consequences of being a late mover. As the world moves towards a lower carbon economy, a key question on which we must collectively focus is how to build on Canada's comparative advantages in a manner that will create jobs, economic opportunity, and prosperity across the country. My job, as I see it, is to work with folks across this land to determine how best to utilize the abundance of resources, technology, and expertise that exist within this country and pursue those opportunities that will drive significant job growth and economic growth. Opportunities from a sectoral perspective will come from new products that enable a low-carbon future, such as critical minerals, hydrogen, electric cars and buses, battery technology, renewable energy, low-carbon building products, small modular reactors, and other clean technologies. And regionally, each province has a relatively unique mix of its own natural resources, so the economic opportunities available to them, and therefore the approaches to a clean energy transition, will be different across this country. What we need is a plan that is based on comparative advantage, one that aligns the efforts and resources of all levels of government as well as the private sector, a plan that also respects the rights and the interests of Indigenous peoples. Such a plan must be thoughtful, collaborative, and ambitious. It must aim to create wealth and good jobs in every region of this country, while ensuring that we achieve our ambitious and our necessary climate goals. Certainly, the regional energy and resource tables, which I launched here in Vancouver about 6 months ago, are a critical process through which such regional plans and an overarching national plan will be developed. These tables seek to identify the most significant areas of economic opportunity in each province and territory, and then to align regulations and permitting processes and bringing to bear the financial resources of both federal and provincial governments to spur growth and create jobs in areas of shared priority in every region of Canada. The result aims to be economic plans at the regional level for the creation of good, well-paying jobs and economic growth. There are now regional tables established in 9 provinces and territories, and work is currently underway to set up tables in the remaining jurisdictions. While the outcomes of those tables are truly intended to be the product of collaboration, and therefore I will not prejudge the ongoing work, there is one thing I think we can all agree on at the outset.
21 ਸਾਲਾ ਪਵਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਕੌਰ ਜਿਸ ਦਾ ਕਤਲ ਮਿਸੀਸਾਗਾ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਗੈਸ ਸਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਸ਼ਨੀਵਾਰ ਕਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਨਸਾਫ ਦੀ ਮੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ, ਜਿਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਪਵਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਦੀ ਮ੍ਰਿਤਕ ਦੇਹ ਨੂੰ ਕੁਝ ਹੀ ਦਿਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਭਾਰਤ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਪੀਲ ਪੁਲਿਸ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਕਾਰਵਾਈ ਪੂਰੀ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਡੈਡ ਬੋਡੀ ਫਨਲ ਹੋਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਭੇਜ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ।
ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਿਮੇਨ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਬਾਡੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਕੋਲ ਜਾਏਗੀ ਤੇ ਮਾਪਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਦਿੱਲੀ ਤੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਣਾ, ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਵਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਘਰੇ ਜੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਉੱਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਹੁੰਚਾ ਕੇ ਆਵਾਂ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਇੱਕ ਕਜ਼ਨ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਵਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਆ ਗਏ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ। ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪ੍ਰੀਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੀਗੀ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਕੇ ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤਿਆਰੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀਆਂ ਉਹ ਹੋ ਚੁੱਕੀਆਂ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਨੇ। ਹੁਣ ਉਹ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਵਾਪਸ ਪਰਤਣਗੇ ਐਜ਼ ਏ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਿਮੇਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਆਪਾਂ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਵਾਪਸ ਜਾਣੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਗੌਰਮੈਂਟ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਗਾਈਡਲਾਈਨਸ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਕਰਨੀਆਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਤਕਰੀਬਨ ਟਾਈਮ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਰੀਏ ਤੇ 4 ਤੋਂ 5 ਦਿਨ ਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸਾਰੇ ਪੇਪਰ ਵਰਕ ਕਲੈਕਟ ਕਰਕੇ। ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਟੀਮ ਹੈਗੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਇੰਡੀਅਨ ਕੌਂਸਲੇਟ ਬੈਠੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ NOC ਲੈਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਤੇ ਜਿੰਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ NOC ਆ ਜਾਏਗੀ ਅੱਜ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਫਲਾਈਟ ਦੀ ਤਿਆਰੀਆਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣਗੀਆਂ। ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਹਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਪੱਤਰਕਾਰਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸਿਹਤ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜੀਨ ਯੋਵੇਸ ਡੁਕਲੋਸ ਨੇ ਹੈਲਥ ਕੇਅਰ ਫੰਡਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਸਬੰਧ 'ਚ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੀਮੀਅਰਾਂ ਦੁਆਰਾ ਉਠਾਈਆਂ ਗਈਆਂ ਤਾਜ਼ਾ ਚਿੰਤਾਵਾਂ ਤੇ ਟਿੱਪਣੀ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ। ਫੈਡਰਲ ਸਿਹਤ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਜੀਨ ਯੋਵੇਸ ਡੁਕਲੋਸ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਓਟਾਵਾ ਸੂਬਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਾਧੂ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੰਭਾਲ ਡਾਲਰ ਪ੍ਰਦਾਨ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਤਿਆਰ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਸਮਝੌਤਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਜੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਮ ਮੁੱਖ ਸਿਹਤ ਸੂਚਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਵਰਤੋਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਧਾਉਣ ਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਬਿਹਤਰ ਸਿਹਤ ਡਾਟਾ
ਬਣਾਉਣ 'ਚ ਵਚਨਬੱਧ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈ।
That they released just a moment ago, so I'm there to reaffirm our commitment and my commitment to keep working with my colleagues, health ministers, as we have done throughout the last year. We've had 12 meetings in total, including one in person in Vancouver. That has been very successful internally. In private, we all agree on the diagnostics that our healthcare system is showing, the importance of supporting workers and patients, reduce backlogs in surgeries and diagnostics. Well, the Prime Minister meets with premiers almost every week.
But
today,
not all together.
Today he just met with Premier Silver. Just a few days ago he met with Premier Ford, he met with Premier Legault. So he has meetings that I have with his homologues almost every week. Well, the Prime Minister will obviously do what he wants to do. What he has asked me to do is to work with my colleagues, health ministers, to agree on results and putting therefore the ends before the means. And the ends are the results that we want to achieve together. Fortunately, in private, although my health minister's colleagues can't do that in private, we all agree on what we need to do together. So supporting health workers, supporting patients, investing in home care, in mental health care, in long-term care, having a modern health data system so that we can increase the quality and the safety of care across our country. So we all agree among ourselves, health ministers. Now we need premiers to let us do our job and express publicly the type of outcomes and results that we need to achieve together. Two things on that. First, funding. There's lots of funding being sent by the federal government as we speak now, and increased funding. Just a few days ago, I was able to announce a $270 million agreement with the province of Quebec on mental health and home care. Very shortly, I'll be able to announce other agreements with other provinces and territories. The $2 billion investment that we are making these days to address backlogs in surgeries and treatments and therefore helping workers in hospitals, that is currently ongoing and being sent to provinces and territories, in addition obviously to the increase in the Canada Health Transfer that we've seen last March, and the additional 10% increase that is coming next March 2023. So there's lots of federal funding in addition to the usual federal funding currently underway. But if dollars were enough, then we would have solved this problem, this crisis that we're seeing a long time ago. And now, as we look across Canada, on average, provinces and territories are running surpluses. So if it were dollars, it wouldn't be important to talk to the federal government. They would have all the dollars needed to invest in healthcare. But we know we need to work together because there are solutions that come faster and better when we do that together.
ਫਿਲਹਾਲ ਵਰਲਡ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਨਿਊਜ਼ 'ਚ ਇੰਨਾ ਹੀ। ਹੋਰ ਖਬਰਾਂ ਲਈ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਟਾਈਮ TV। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਦਿਓ ਆਗਿਆ। ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।